Joining us now on All Access AM is Conor O'Neill. Conor, thanks so much for the time, man. Your weekend plans certainly taking the shift here thanks to SMU.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I was looking forward to covering basketball for a week and just kind of taking a breath on football with signing day, obviously. But yeah, things change. It's funny too. Like people kept saying, "Don't you know how many things have to happen for Duke to get in there?" It's like, have you paid attention to the ACC this year?
and really for Duke, it's kind of crazy how the ACC tiebreakers work, because most people were saying, oh, okay, if SMU loses or if UVA loses, doesn't that mean that Miami's going to go, or a Pitt or a Georgia Tech? But no, Duke did what it needed to do to hang around. And Duke didn't obviously do much of anything in its non-conference slate, but with this league schedule, they were able to manage to find a way to just win the games that they should have, in a sense. And that is really why they're playing for an ACC championship on Saturday.
Yeah, it's that, and it's also just where we are with the tiebreaker stuff. And I think it's a different conversation with whether the tiebreakers need to change. But the way the tiebreakers are set up is it benefited Duke that I think there were 5 teams in the ACC that finished under 500 in the league, and Duke only played 2 of them. And then you look at the other side of it, Duke played the team that finished above everybody. They played Virginia and obviously lost to them a couple weeks ago. And they played one of the other teams that finished 6-2. And then there are 5 teams that finished 4-4 in the league, and Duke played 4 of them and went 4-0 against that group. I think off the top of my head, it was Wake, Clemson, NC State, and Cal, I believe, were all the 4-4 teams. And then I think Louisville was also 4-4 in the league. But like, you can only play who the league says you're scheduled to play. And in a 17-team league with an 8-game conference schedule, you're going to get this every single season. There's going to be unbalanced schedules. And here's the kicker of it is, everybody talks about this great season Virginia has. The only one of the 6-2, there were 5 6-2 teams in the ACC. The only one that Virginia played was Duke. So you talk about a team that, like, I'm not going to sit here and say they're a bad team and that they just got lucky with the scheduling, but I am going to say they didn't exactly play a gauntlet of the ACC schedule to be 7-1 in the league.
Oh, 100%. This Virginia Duke game is fascinating, because will Virginia kind of do what it did and take care of business and do all of the things that we saw it do throughout the year? Their lone loss in league play coming without Chandler Morris. And of course, the NC State game, which non-league loss. But you have a Duke team that is probably capable of beating this Virginia team, just because of the way Virginia has not necessarily been as battle tested as this Duke team.
So the interesting part of it is you look at Duke's 5 losses. I would say 4 of the 5, they did more to beat themselves than the other team did to dominate them. The one that I would say is the exception is the Virginia game. Like, Virginia came out and just steamrolled Duke. Duke could not block Virginia's front. Like, I think Brian Parker, the Duke right tackle, who I put on my first team All ACC ballot, I think he's an NFL draft pick in a few months. I think he had given up 1 sack in his career before the Virginia game, and he gave up 2 that night. They could not block Virginia. They couldn't get off blocks against Virginia. Virginia's offense just went up and down the field. It was Virginia was 12 of 19 on third downs. Just an abhorrent critical down game for Duke's defense, which that's been the case for the last 3 games. They gave up 50% against Wake Forest, and it was like, oh, good job. That's an improvement, because they gave up 8 of 13 against Carolina. So that's the interesting part of this is, does Saturday look like a repeat of 2 weeks ago? Because if so, then all of the doomsday scenario talk, all of the consternation of what happens if the ACC gets completely left out of the playoff, that all goes out the window. And the ACC, if Virginia comes out and dominates Duke the way that they did 2 weeks ago, the ACC could get 2 in the playoff, because you're getting Virginia in, and then you're also looking at a 10-2 Miami team that has a head-to-head over Notre Dame that I think the ACC's best move is to continue the PR spin that they've been running for the last couple of weeks about Miami should be in over Notre Dame. So that's kind of the interesting thing to me. And Duke will have to see what adjustments they make. Their defense has just been held together with duct tape and string for the last few weeks. They've been losing guys. They've basically played the last 2 games with 2 linebackers available. And they play 2 in their base defense. So Luke Mergott and Kendall Johnson have just been the Iron Men in the middle of that defense. And their secondary just plays a bunch of young guys. They've been 2 of their top 3 corners have both missed games in the past month. One of them was out, and then when the other one came back, the other one was out. So they're holding things together. It's going to come down to, I think, forcing turnovers. I think they actually did force turnovers, but one was a late pick 6 when it was already like a 31-10 game. So they're going to have to do kind of the same things they did to Wake Forest. They forced 4 against Wake Forest. Wake was casual with the football. Their ball security was bad, and Duke's got to kind of create some ways to get off the field other than just forcing punts, because that hasn't been happening much.
When you look at what Duke has as far as, I think, the experience playing the schedule that it did in non-conference, I think that's helpful in a sense. This Virginia team that they've already seen isn't still the best team that they've played all year in a sense. So there's, I feel like, a little bit more of that battle testedness that Duke has. And I'm interested to see how that shows itself now that they do get their rematch. That's the funny thing. Of course, you mentioned Miami having the win over Notre Dame head to head, but here's Virginia having a win at Duke, right off the bat. So the rematch, who knows? Maybe they'll have to play again next weekend to finalize the best 2 out of 3, but that is not how it works. You mentioned the injuries. Duke, are they going to get healthy for this game? Is there a possibility they're going to get some of these guys back into the fold?
I would wager a guess that Landon Callahan, the corner who's missed last 2, maybe they get him back. We weren't told he was a season-ending injury or anything like that. Maybe the freshman linebacker Bradley Gompers, he could help from a depth perspective and from a special teams standpoint. The other linebacker, the main linebacker that would really help them is Trey Freeman. He's a 5th-year guy. He's played a ton of football over the years. I'm hesitant to say that he would be back just because let me see if I remember this correctly. I think he missed the UConn game. He might have missed the Carolina game. Like, he came back for Virginia. He got re-injured against Wake Forest. Like, he's just been so banged up that I don't know if you can count on having a guy like that for a game. Trying to think off the top of my head. Their defensive line has been healthy. They've lacked some production over the last few weeks, maybe a couple of months. You could go as far to say. Really in the linebacker room. And then they've lost 2 linebackers for the season. Nick Morris Jr. they lost in the 4th game of the year, and they lost a freshman who was kind of filling in for him, Elliot Shopper. Lost him, I think, the Clemson game. So there's a little hope. Getting healthy in the secondary would definitely help, but I don't know if they'll get everybody back that they need.
What does Darian Mensah need to do this weekend to get this offense on the right track so that this time around there's changes in the final result for Duke?
So around him, they need to protect him better than they did the first time around against Virginia, because he was uncomfortable that whole game. It was the worst game he played, and part of that had to do with the pressure he felt. The other part is he's got to make decisive reads. When you're under pressure, when you feel it coming, you've got to get rid of it. You got to get it out to the hot, and he didn't do that enough against Virginia. I don't think he had a turnover in that game. He amazingly has 4 interceptions this year, and they all came in the non-conference games. He was 17-0 touchdown interception in ACC games. But he's got to find receivers early if Virginia is going to apply the same type of pressure. I mean, you can't just sit back there and Mitchell Melton's going to beat you. It's going to be bad news if you try to sit back there for 3 and 4 seconds against this Virginia defensive front. So they've got to do some different things offensively. And I went on a little bit of a rant on my podcast yesterday about this. Like, we talk so much about X's and O's football and we make it as complicated as possible. It's still a game of two things. Can you block the guy in front of you and can you tackle the other guy with the ball? And Duke, frankly, did not do the former. Like, they did not block Virginia in the first game. And if Duke does not block Virginia in this game, they're going to leave Charlotte at 7-6, and everybody's going to be saying they shouldn't have been in the game in the first place. And it's going to be a pretty simple discussion. But Duke's offensive line just has to play better. It really does become that simple when you talk about what Duke's offense has to do, and then what that will allow Darian Mensah to do, and what it would allow him to look like, and look like the quarterback that he's been for the most part this season.
I am still trying to figure out who I would pick whenever I've got to make my pick in this game. I am so intrigued by Duke because obviously we don't know beyond 25 what Duke is going to be ranked, or if they're going to go into this weekend ranked. That'll be something we find out Tuesday night, because I do think Duke, impressive in the sense that they demolished Wake Forest, that the way they did, especially the way they played, putting up 49 points. Let's go back to that game. What clicked in particular for Duke to really see that offense explode against a Wake defense that, for the large part this year has been the reason why Jake Dickert and company are where they are?
It was part of what Duke did. It was also a little bit of Wake Forest pulling a Duke. And by that, I mean, they did some self-destructing of their own. Duke had 7 touchdowns. The three long drives that they got for touchdowns, all of them had 2 explosive play penalties against Wake Forest defense. There were pass interferences, I think 1 personal foul on one of the first 2. You're making life a lot more difficult for yourself if you're giving Duke's offense free yardage, free first downs. I think one of them on the first drive was a 3rd down throw. And then of Duke's 7 touchdown drives, 4 of them were under 40 yards. There was a 20-yard punt by Wake Forest that put Duke at like the 34-yard line going in. There was a 80-yard kick return where Duke 2 plays later, Nate Shepard ran in a 13-yard touchdown. Like, those are things that obviously, it's not some great mystery of special teams can win you a game, turnovers can win you a game. But it was a lot of Wake Forest self-destruction as much as it was Duke dominating to score 49 points against Wake Forest, because Wake's defense, I think they still only gave up maybe less than 400 yards in that game. But just the hidden yardage in return yards and turnovers and bad punts, bad field position stuff, that's where it kind of got away from Wake. And to Duke's credit, I mean, you've got to go out there and take advantage. You can't go out there and settle for field goals when you're on the other team's 35 to start a drive.
All right, I'll leave you, or I'll get you out of here with this. Does Duke do it? Do they win? Do we get more ACC chaos in a sense?
I don't know. I've gone into the last 4 or 5 Duke games saying I have no idea what to expect. I usually have a pretty good feel for the teams I cover, especially after you've seen them for 12 games. I don't know what to expect from this Duke team. I honestly, Billy, I walked out of the Virginia game. I walked out of Wallace Wade 2 weeks ago. I thought there was a 30 to 40% chance this team would finish 5-7. Like, Carolina was trending better than they had been. And it's not like Duke dominated that one. That was a touchdown game where they're down 1 and had to run a fake field goal to get down to the 1-yard line and score with 2+ minutes left. And then Duke has a 4-0 turnover margin and gets outgained against Wake Forest and still wins. So this is kind of you don't want to say it's a bonus scenario for Duke, because that implies that it wasn't earned. Like, they did earn this. They went 6-2 in the ACC, but man, it's really hard to predict what this team is going to do on a weekly basis.
No doubt. Well, Conor, thanks so much for the time this morning. It was a blast having you on, of course, and enjoy Charlotte this weekend as Duke takes on Virginia for the ACC Championship, 8 o'clock Eastern time on ABC. Conor O'Neill covering the Duke angle of it. Thanks for joining All Access AM.
Thanks, Billy.